Good morning.
I want to welcome you to this press torture, detention, and even exile. So seeing where the country is coming back, or has come back even in more vicious manner, and therefore, as persons who have gone through old days, as you see, none of these people is young. But we are not too old to fight, because we owe it to present Kenyans, their children, and their children's children to inherit a better country. Some of these might look very isolated events, but we are seeing a pattern. And if we allow this country to slide into tyranny, in the kind of impunity, those extrajudicial executions, then we as Kenyans, least of all us who have gone through that kind of experience, we will be letting this country down. And that is why we decided to come out of our different hiding corners, because most of these people, actually after that, they have been surviving in a very, very difficult way, because they be declared pariah by the state, but their spirit has not been broken. So I want to thank you for responding. I think the notice was fairly short, but you are here. So we want to introduce ourselves, then we'll know which media houses are here, and then we'll ask Honorable Gitobu Imanyara to read our formal statement. So we'll start from this end to the
24 hours and about 10-15 minutes of daylight to ourselves. I also spent a number of weeks at Naivasha Maximum Security Prison, and at one time I was facing some 33 counts of sedition for publishing the Nairobi Law Monthly. I'm happy that I've been given the responsibility of reading this statement, which is on behalf of many of us. This is only a representative group of those who are around Nairobi. And so when we read it, we are reading it on behalf of, as Professor said, more than 200 people scattered all over Kenya. And we are not in any way special to them, but we represent them. So let me read the statement. Press statement by former political prisoners. We are gaping wounds, not scars, of an oppressive regime. We, the undersigned former political prisoners, speak today not as relics of a bygone era, but as living, breathing witnesses to the brutality and impunity that defined Kenya's repressive regime of the 1980s and 1990s. We carry within us not fading scars, but open wounds, gaping reminders of torture chambers, solitary confinement, forced disappearances, sham trials, detention without trial, and the ruthless extinguishing of dissent. It is with deep anguish and profound alarm that we observe a chilling resurgence of the same tactics, abductions, torture, and executions targeting individuals perceived to be opponents of this regime. The arrest, torture, and cold-blooded murder of Albert Ojwang, a young Kenyan whose only crime appears to have been his political conscience, signals to the nation that the sanctity of life and the safety of citizens are no longer assured. The state has abdicated its responsibility to protect and in its place has unleashed forces of terror upon the very people it ought to serve. Ojwang's murder is not an isolated incident. It builds upon a growing pattern of enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings that are fast becoming the identifying mark of this regime. State-sanctioned lawlessness, once the bitter memory of our generation, is now normalized in the present. As survivors of the darkest chapter in our history, a chapter soaked in the blood and tears of patriots, we not only express our outrage, but also reaffirm our unyielding commitment to resist the return of a rogue state. Silence is not an option. Appeasement is not peace. We must confront tyranny wherever it sprouts. We therefore make the following demands. 1. Immediate dismantling of all killer squads and clandestine units operating within the Kenya Police Force and other security formations. These squads are a danger to the Republic and must be disbanded without delay. 2. Arrest, suspension, and impartial investigation with a view to prosecution of Eliud Lagat, the police officer widely believed to be the prime suspect in the abduction, torture, and murder of Albert Ojwang. Justice must not only be done, but must be seen to be done. 3. A public judicial inquiry into the rising incidents of abductions, torture, and extrajudicial executions across the country. Only a transparent process led by an independent judiciary can restore public confidence in the rule of law. 4. A comprehensive and genuine reforms in the criminal justice system, including oversight and accountability mechanisms in the police service, judiciary, and prosecutorial services. We demand a justice system that serves the public, not power. Let it be known, the ghosts of Nyayo House, the Wagala massacre, the Kwekwe squad torture camps walk among us again. We who lived through these horrors will not watch in silence as our children and grandchildren are dragged into the same abyss. The state must choose either to return to democratic order and the rule of law, or to plunge headlong into the abyss of repression and impunity. Never, never again must not become an empty slogan. It must be a rallying cry for all freedom-loving Kenyans. And it is signed by those of us who are before you. Thank you. And if any clarifications is required, it can be directed to any of us.
Thank you very much. If you have...
In any rule of law-based society, there are mechanisms for enforcing the law, mechanisms for dealing with persons suspected of committing criminal offenses. And these mechanisms are set out very clearly, not only in our Constitution, but more specifically in the Criminal Procedure Code, which requires that a police officer must not only identify themselves, but must disclose what offense you are alleged to have committed. Abductions is the very opposite of that. I can tell you, even during my time, they would come. I don't know how they managed to get the keys, direct keys to my back office. I just heard my door being opened, and within seconds, a group of about 7, 8 had carried me down the stairs. That was Tumaini House. Blindfolded, you are put in a vehicle and you are taken to a known place. Now that is the abduction. Complete reversal of what rule of law stands for. Complete reversal of what the Criminal Procedure Code and other laws demand. They do not even bother to enter you into an OB. They keep sham papers in the police stations where they purport to record until the OCS comes to approve what goes onto the OB and what does not go. So you get your relatives, lawyer, or friends going to every single police station, and OB will show you have not been there when you are in that very same station. So basically that is it. One is a criminal, is a terrorist action against an individual. The other one is provided for in our laws to deal with people suspected of committing criminal offenses.
So, from June last year to today, are we going back to this dark days?
We are not going back. We are already there. We are already there. And that is why we are here to let President Ruto understand that these tactics will not work. They did not work in the 1990s. He is pursuing the more template of running the country that is possible only in a dictatorship. We have a constitution, a living constitution, and Kenyans will not accept to go back to the dark days of one-party imperial presidency, where President Ruto wants to take this country to. I just say this, that unlike the past, during our time, even at the international level now, we have the Rome Statute, that is the International Criminal Court, that was accepted by humanity, just like the United Nations founding Declaration of the Fundamental Human Rights, as a mechanism for holding to account those like President Ruto who feel that they're above the law. And we went further in this country. We actually domesticated the international criminal, the Rome Statute into International Crimes Act. So there's a command structure, and there is provision not only in our laws, as you'll have noticed in the Pendo case, where those in positions of authority, those who are not directly responsible, like those who are the cell sentry, those who gave those orders, there is now mechanisms for holding them to the account. The International Crimes Act of our laws, and eventually at the level of the president and those others who think that by being elected into office, they have been given a carte blanche to run the country as they wish, like in the days of imperial presidency. That is long gone. And I can confirm as we talk to you that there are mechanisms, there are moves to getting an investigation conducted by the International Criminal Court. These are not idle issues. So when we stand or sit before you to raise these issues, it's not to prevent, but to warn and let the country know that it's no longer if we are returning to the dark days, but we are there. Ojwang would not be dead today if we were not there. Rosenjeri would not have been arrested, abducted and arrested and charged with flimsy charges if we were not there. So what we must do is to remind our people that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. They must remember that people have gone through this, and we are just examples of this, what has happened. We are lucky that we can talk. There are those who are long dead, buried in graves or their bodies thrown into rivers. That's what we must say. We must reverse that trend.
To add, one of our recommends arrest, suspension, and investigation with a view to prosecution of one Eliud Lagat. I don't know what stepping aside means. So for us, we want to see that person arrested. He can't still walk free, interfering with the investigations. We don't want him to step aside. He should step down or he be suspended. We have authorities to which he reports. We don't want this playing to the gallery that somebody says stepping aside, which I don't know what it means in law.
Actually,
Number two, this case of Ojwang, this is something we thought was long gone. In 1986, we had a similar case of one Baraka Karanja, who was abducted that way, brought to Nyayo House the way they used to bring us there, blindfolded. And when the court ordered that he be produced in court, they seem to have killed him long time ago. So they went in Eldoret and I think dug how many graves looking for him. So we are going back to a very, very chilling situation that we had gone through. Okay.
On what's happening now, I find something very distinct coming out. That in those days, when we had detention without trial, it appears that it was safer. Because if the state had no way of taking you to court, they would take you to prison and detain you without trial. But this regime seems to have another type of detention, which is killing. You know, I expect in those days, somebody like Ngodo Kariku was detained for several years, may have been killed. But in the absence of detention without trial, now I see this regime is just taking people to heaven. So that's something very new about this regime. Another aspect of this regime, which I find special, is that while the Kenyatta and Moi administration mainly targeted leaders for killing, this particular regime targets young people. You know, more young people have been killed by these people compared to maybe us. In the regimes of Moi, maybe they would have killed us and spared our children. But now, this regime is killing the future. I find this a very special thing. We didn't make one call, which I think maybe ought to be added, that a regime that has committed crimes to these degrees has no business staying in office. I think the Ruto administration should have the courage to just step aside and give Kenyans a chance to administer themselves. And I think in this forum also I wish to say that the comrades who have maybe tried to see whether they can work with this regime should also reconsider their position. Why should the opposition have a joint team in managing our affairs when the other party is not honoring its end of the bargain? So I also think that it's our duty to appeal to comrades who are working with the Ruto administration to basically disengage and give Kenyans a chance to really choose a new administration. Because as things stand now, the Ruto administration is in office just because ODM supports it. If ODM moves out, Kenyans can start looking for a solution. So I also want to appeal that this government is denied the support that it's getting from patriotic people so that we can create the necessary situation for us to think of how to form a new government. Thank you.
That issue you raised about
Wait.
such provision in our constitution or in our law as we sit here today, providing for a constitution office holder to step aside. There isn't. Unless an investigation is already in progress. So that, for example, if it's a judge, the moment the Judicial Service Commission recommends an investigation, that officer then goes on, goes out of office pending the investigation. Now, the mechanisms for removal of or leaving of office of constitutional office holders doesn't provide for stepping aside. The National Police Service ought to have come out and stated that they have begun investigations, not investigations by junior police officers or IPOA. These are not constitutional offices. The provision under Article 245 is very clear, is a National Police Service. As we talk to you today, there hasn't been any statement from the National Police Service. In fact, if you look at that alleged letter of stepping aside, it's not addressed to anyone. It's very curious document, because it ought to have been addressed to the National Police Service, who would then immediately take the necessary action to commence or to initiate the investigation process. It is not upon a constitutional office holder to declare who holds that office when they are under investigation. He has no such power. So you can say we are being tricked. They do not mean business. And Lagat has to be held to account. You shouldn't just go into hiding, telling us you've gone into, or you have stepped aside, when the National Police Commission has not formally started an investigation.
And what will be your next course of action?
There are procedures, and there are Kenyans who have already gone to court to seek declarations of the High Court. So there are methods of holding him to account. And part of what is happening today in the streets of Nairobi is one of those mechanisms of people exercising their sovereignty, demanding action. That is a form of mechanism recognized under Article 1 of our Constitution. Because the sovereign will always remain with the people, and the people are making that demand. They're expressing it through the Gen Zs in the streets now as we talk, and they'll continue doing that. So Mr. Lagat ought to understand that that history where you could just declare that you are no longer in office and you're going to be out for a short time, and during that time so and so hold your office, it doesn't exist in our laws.
And even to add, it's like he has suspended himself. Who told him to step aside? Where is that derived from? So, like he says, the letter is vague, it's ambiguous. And I don't know for how long he is himself stepping aside, having chose to use that terminology that does not exist in law. The other bit which I wanted to echo, based on what he said, you and me, it is becoming clearer. And even without guessing, you would rather know who then owns these hooded individuals who abduct people. We can now emphatically know the origin and who is owning them. Somebody who is not using the legal means to do what is right and picking up goons elsewhere. And that is a trend that has been going on. And again, we'll agree the social media has been there as long as I've lived. Even our times when we were young, we used to write names on sisols. Somebody will say, you know, he's a boyfriend of so-and-so, he's doing this. You get annoyed. Some people will get into washrooms, they'll write your name, and many things would happen. Only that you have upgraded it because of Bobela scam. And we were not really, because somebody calls you a dog and you know you're not a dog, you have no tail. So you don't take law into your hand to reduce or to demean such a country. So I echo what my able councillor said, and we are not going to give up. We will still continue. Thank you.
Maybe the last question.
3 things I want to say. June 25th will remain a red letter day for this country. Just like yesterday, June 16th, which was sparked off by children's resistance at Soweto in South Africa, has become the African Day of the Child. For us, that is the time when very young people took the struggle that we have been involved in at a much higher level. Because people do not realize that on June 25th, actually, the government was overrun. When you breach parliament, that is an arm of government, the legislature was gone. Supreme Court was overrun, that is the judiciary. Kasongo was forced to dissolve his cabinet, which means the executive was overrun. That is historic. So we know, because we can't pretend to chaperone these young people. We know they are creative, they are organizing, and I know that they will be remembered. And without fear of contradiction, these and other former political prisoners are 100% behind these young people. Now, when it comes to the issue of compensation, you know, you can't put a price on life. It's impossible. So the first thing is that these things should never happen in our country. No life should be lost in this manner. People should not disappear from the face of the earth without people knowing where they are gone. That's prime. However, you can't bring back people to life. And that is why, basically, it is about saying, sorry. This money, even if it's whatever millions, it's simply saying sorry. So it's not buying a life that happened. But I want to say something about this thing of compensation. These people you are seeing, almost all of them sued the state over what we went through, the torture, the illegal detentions, and so on. And some of us even got court order to compensate us. 30 years down the line, those have not been effected. Secondly, we have recommendation of the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission. The former president even talked about setting aside some 10 billion shillings to deal with those historical injustices. Nothing has happened. So what I'm saying is that we have to keep on pushing and exercising Article 1 of sovereignty. We must hold these people to account, and we'll help our young people push as they help us defeat this regime.
emphasize a little more. Nyayo House torture chambers was a chamber created to torture, and that's where we ended up. We have written that material, is in some books, and therefore, in terms of our understanding or our experience, and in terms of our resorts, we didn't expect torture again. But now from what we heard about our colleague last week, the torture is back. So what we are saying is we condemn and we won't stand by and watch. We are not saying we are taking over Gen Z's job. Let them do their job. We are coming here to say we went through it. We will not watch while it is happening again. And I may also want to mention that one of our comrades, Nguge Wathiongo, was part of us. He was part of detainees, and he's late, and so we recognize his contributions. I also would want to say that a lot of families were left without support. People died in prison, others came and went out of the country. So it is a destabilizing situation. But we have come here to stand for the truth, to stand for what should not happen again. As we watched it, we also had people die, like you heard of Kalaja, Balaka Kalaja. There was also someone who was thrown out of 26th floor of Nyayo House downstairs. So this has happened before. We don't want it to happen again.
Let me say something about that. It is not the guilty person who offers compensation. These things are happening. The command responsibility takes us all the way to the house on the hill. President Ruto cannot be the one to determine who is to be abducted and who is to be compensated. Just like that half-hearted apology, it must be preceded by an acknowledgement. Yes, we murdered Ojwang, and then refer the matter to some authority to make the compensation. You do not commit a crime and determine how much the victim has suffered. Just like you do not issue an apology by saying if, you acknowledge and then apologize. We are not seeing any of that. And more importantly, this compensation should be seen in the context of the number of people injured, maimed, and killed on June 25. How many of them have been compensated? Why not a uniform policy of compensation that applies to all the victims? That is what ought to happen. This ritual of prolonging investigations or making promises in order to buy time should end. And therefore, a rule of law ought to apply. The President or Minister for Interior should say, we are guilty, we apologize, we are offering compensation. Yeah, it's the same with apology. So we must see it in that context. And that compensation ought to spread to all the victims of this period of abductions starting on June 25.